Open Your Eyes is brought to you by the Belize Bank. Our country, your bank.
Good morning. Welcome to Open Your Eyes.
Start your morning, right?
I'm Marleny
And I'm Gavin Courtney.
and thank you for joining us this morning.
Yeah, it's almost the weekend.
Yes, very much so. Oh, all right. We're going to get right into our weather for today, and we have Francisca on the line.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you doing today?
I'm good, thanks. How about you guys?
We're doing great. Hopefully gonna get some good news right now. So, Francisca, can you tell us what our general situation is looking like?
All right. We are seeing that relatively moist and unstable conditions will set in, but I must say it will affect mostly the south, as that's where the showers and thunderstorms will be concentrated.
Okay then. And over the next 24 hours?
That's what's going to happen. Tonight we'll see a decrease in the activity, and then we'll see it again tomorrow afternoon. Mostly
Okay.
inland and the south.
All right. So pretty wet and wet conditions down south. And what about the winds?
All right, we're having winds from the east and southeast, 10 to 20 knots, and this is producing moderate seas.
Okay, and in terms of our temperatures, what are we looking at in terms of highs?
Okay then, in the Maya Mountains, we're going for an 83 Fahrenheit, along the coast 88, and inland areas 96.
Okay, and the lows?
Okay, tonight along the coast 82 Fahrenheit, inland 75, and the Maya Mountains 70.
So it's pretty warm.
Yes,
overall.
yes, that's true.
Okay, are there any advisories or warnings that people should be aware of?
Well, as we say every day to people, because of the high temperatures, especially inland, that they should try to stay out of the sun as much as possible and stay hydrated. And then we also have the forest fire risk, and we're seeing that it is low over the south and moderate over northern areas. So from the fire maps that we are observing, we're still having hotspots or fires occurring mostly over the northern part of the country.
Oh, okay. But the south is a little bit better and they've gotten some relief because of the rains, right?
That's right.
Okay, and as we're going into the weekend, what can we what does the outlook look like for the next few days?
Well, I'm seeing drier conditions after tomorrow, so it will be mostly isolated showers or isolated thunderstorms, and I'm seeing those occurring most over the Maya Mountains in the afternoons.
Okay,
So the rest of the country will be much drier.
All right, so, and you know it's going to be a long weekend, so maybe people won't be too much affected by the rain.
That's right.
All right, well, that sounds good. Thank you so much for that update.
You're welcome.
All right, have a great day.
Thanks, same to you.
Bye. All right. So we have a wet day ahead, especially in the south.
Yep.
All right. And high temperatures all around.
Yeah, I know. but could be nice to get out to be in the sun. Maybe if you're one of those morning joggers, I bet.
Oh, there are a lot
really
of them
nice.
now. I love it.
Yep.
You know,
for
I have to say, I'm seeing so many more people out exercising in the morning, and it really is great. I think that people have taken advantage of the opportunity. We know that there's a specific time where people can go out, and so it's not very busy, but you see a lot of people making use of the opportunity.
Yeah, for sure, I do. Every morning, I've been seeing almost more and more people, and it's really good. I think you know, whether it's jogging, even riding bicycles, you know, just staying active.
Just walking.
Yeah, walking. Yeah, it's good, great to see, and it's always good to see when people taking care of themselves and being like proactive about their health.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've noticed the increase in the amount of people.
And you know, I also think that it's just an opportunity, I think, one, to definitely try to be a bit healthier, But also, you know, it really is a great stress reliever
Yes.
for everyone who's feeling a bit tense these days.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Countless studies have been done on this, and they show how beneficial exercise is to your mental as well as your physical health. So absolutely, stress relief, or even just taking your mind to like a different place, so it could be somewhat peaceful, or taking time for yourself. Even if you're with other people, it's kind of a moment where you can kind of forget about problems just for one, for however long you're out there. So yeah, definitely it's good for both.
All right. And now we're going to get moving from talking about physical exercise. That's a mental exercise. We're going to give you some motivation to get your day started in our eye opener. And our eye opener, taken from dailyom.com, goes like this. Dwelling in guilt is like living your life with an anchor tied to your ankles, dragging you down. Learning to accept the things that we perceive as wrong can be a difficult task for many of us. Often, we have been brought up to accept that it is normal to feel guilty about our actions, and that by doing so, we will make everything seem all right within ourselves. Even though we might feel that we have a reason to make up for the choices we have made, it is much more important we deal with them in a healthy and positive way. When we look back at our past and really assess what has happened, we begin to realize that there are many dimensions to our actions. Giving ourselves permission to feel at peace with our past actions is one of the most positive steps we can take toward living a life free from regrets, disappointments, and guilt. The more we're able to remind ourselves that the true path to a peaceful mind and heart is through acceptance of every part of our lives and actions, the more harmony and inner joy we will experience in all aspects of our lives.
That's a really interesting message. I like it because it got me thinking of basically whenever I hear people, you ask the question whether or not people have regrets or if they're, in general. A lot of people usually say no, and it's because you can't really you can't change the past. I was going to say can't really, but you can't change the past, and everything that did happen is all the sum of your past actions and reactions or whatever, got you to where you are. Yeah. So while of course we all have moments that we're not proud of or that we want to keep behind us, but what's important is to not carry the guilt, because then it becomes like a burden. And it makes things difficult, and you want to be in a position to like acknowledge and accept, but you want to move on from the past. Yeah. So when you're weighed down by feelings of guilt and regret, that's really difficult, and it's really painful as well. So it's always better to, and if you are in that position, I think, where you need to move on, or you can't, or you're stuck feeling it, then talking about it is always helpful, but it comes, with recognizing that it is a problem and that you have to be willing to fix it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and I think the opening message it's so visual, and you can really think of, if you've ever experienced guilt, just how heavy it is, the burden you feel. It mentally and physically weighs you down if you're feeling really bad about something that you have acknowledged that perhaps was your responsibility or your error. I think the eye-opener really just reminds us that, one, we all get to this place, and two, that we have to work through it. Yeah. You can feel the guilt, and you said the right thing, there's nothing you can do about it. Mm-hmm. I think what happens is that sometimes we're waiting for forgiveness that just may never come. Yeah. Or we're waiting for forgiveness even though we don't ask for it. Yeah. So we think that we're carrying this guilt, and somehow someday someone will absolve us, but it doesn't work like that. You got to be proactive about it. And so whether it is that you seek out to make amends for it, as one step, but you can't have expectations that everyone will just forgive you.
Yeah.
It means that you have to let it go. But I think just being able to recognize that the things that you may be carrying are having a far bigger effect on you than you think is already one way of getting yourself into a healthier mindset. When you acknowledge that this is what I'm feeling and this is why I'm perhaps challenged in this way, that's the first positive step that you're making. Mm-hmm. And then doing something about it.
Yeah.
And if you can't work through it on your own, it's always important to know at which point you need to reach out for help.
Yeah.
And if that means talking to a good friend and confidant, or being able to access a professional counselor or therapist to help you move through it, all of these things are perfectly fine, but just don't stay with that heaviness on you.
Yeah, and I really love that you said that you have to be proactive about it, because it's true. And I think that so many of us have faced situations where perhaps we are carrying some sort of like residual, like let's say guilt from a situation maybe, and maybe it was something that maybe it's just in your head and you wouldn't really know, but either you've said or did something that you thought, like let's say maybe upset somebody, but you don't address it. Mm-hmm. So you go on and it creates some sort of awkwardness or tension because you're feeling bad that maybe you did something wrong. Mm-hmm. But if you're not proactive about it and you think, oh, well, maybe I won't mention it, or maybe you feel embarrassed or shy or whatever about going about it, but and I've been in the situation too where sometimes you think, well, maybe the other person is going to bring it up and address it, and then
but it depends on the person.
Yeah, that's true. And then again, sometimes even waiting for that other person to bring it up can backfire as well, because if it's something that you leave brewing for a while, then you never know where that can go. Yeah. But I think it's important to, as you said, to be proactive about it. And whatever you're feeling, I think that you should be trying to minimize or let go of the negative feelings that go to the that relate to past actions or whatever. So really being proactive and confronting it head on is what you have to do, because there's no other way.
Yep. Got to get comfortable with difficult conversations.
Yeah.
All right, we got to keep it moving. We really hope that that's been a helpful eye-opener for you today, that perhaps will just get you through whatever it is that you're struggling with, or just giving you a new perspective on how we deal with guilt. And we got to get ready to move into our show for today. Gavin, you mentioned, of course, it is a long weekend ahead. It actually is our last long weekend until September. Mm-hmm. So I know a lot of people are going to be moving around, since the latest statutory instrument allows for local travel, and we got to get talking about what's happening in our tourism industry. So we're going to talk to two representatives of the Belize Tourism Industry Association about what conversations they're having, what their outlook is, and definitely just how they're able to weather what is going on right now.
Yeah. And for our second conversation, over the past few weeks, if you've been following our show and following the news in general, you would of course know that we've been having some serious problems with forest fires over especially a lot of the heavily forested and protected areas of the country. Yeah. And we are going to be having a conversation with the Friends for Conservation and Development, and they're going to give us an update on the status of some of the protected areas, especially those that have been most affected.
All right, and of course, the third part of the show. You ready to do your Aussie dance?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so what is it? Thumbs out?
Knees together.
Okay, great.
I got it.
So, all right, you're the pro with this one. Ozzy's going to be with us, and he's going to be talking about his show that he's been doing online for the kids, and just a little bit about how it's been going. We saw him before he started it. He said he was going to go and make sure he can keep the kids entertained, and we'll check in and see how it's going.
Yeah, and of course we're going to keep things going for the kids, because we've got Kids Time coming up after that. And today, Dr. Binox is going to be teaching the young kids all about supernovas.
Ooh, all right. So that's what we have in store for today. We're going to go ahead and take a break, but we got that birthday shout out first.
Yes, we do. So from all of us here at Open Your Eyes on Channel 5, we want to wish a really happy birthday to Verly Lam.
All right, Verly, we hope you have a great day today. Do enjoy. We'll take that break, and when we come back, we're going to be talking about the tourism industry in the midst of the pandemic. So please stay tuned.
Today's COVID update is brought to you by Fulltech Systems, your technology center, where you'll come for the price, but stay for the service.
And we're back. And we are getting ready to move into our first conversation for this morning, where our focus is on the tourism industry. We know that the tourism sector took a massive blow, and with the opening of the local tourism travel, we want to find out just what the expectations are and what's happening in that sector. So we have with us the Executive Director of the Belize Tourism Industry Association, John Burgess, and we have the second Vice President for the BTIA, Stuart Crone. Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
I got to start off and say, of course, we're most jealous of you, Stuart, because you get to be in Placencia to have this interview.
We've learned a lot about technology just because of this virus.
We all have. And, well, you know, I think let's just start with the overview. I know, John, the last time we talked, you kind of had that preliminary assessment as to what the impact has been so far. Now that we're about 2 months in, what is the status? What are members saying about the level of difficulty they've been facing?
Marleny, the crude reality remains very much on the negative side. We see the number of unemployment increasing because many of the properties, and Stuart can relate to this, they were trying to keep their staff on board, even at reduced salary for as long as possible, but now they're reaching a point where they no longer can afford to do so. So they're going to begin to lay off. You saw what Tropicare did this week. That is just one of the many stakeholders that's going to have to. It's not a matter of they wanting to. It's something that they have to because their monies have depleted and they cannot continue without the international market.
Yeah. Stuart, what's happening in Placencia? Tell us that perspective.
Things are pretty grim, Marleny. I think when this thing first started, let's call it mid-March, I think a lot of the owners and operators of tourism-related businesses really did not understand what the long-term implications might be. So you had various properties that came out very heroically and said, well, we're not going to lay off our people. We can get through this. Not realizing that what we're talking about, it's not a 1 month thing. It's not a 2 month thing. It's not a 3 month thing. It's minimally, it's an 18-month proposition. And if you didn't think it through that hard, now you're in the position where, like John said, you've kept your employees, but you're going to run out of money. Some of us will run out of money next week. Some of us will run out of money next year. But every tourism operation at some point within that 18 months, even the healthiest one, is going to run out of money. And that money's got to come from someplace, whether it's bank, whether it's bringing in new shareholders, whether it's selling assets, or as BTIA is proposing, we need the country, the government needs to make a plan for the long-term recovery of the tourism industry. And the best way to do that is to help us access long-term, low-interest loans from the international financial institutions. That's really the only long-term way out that we see.
You know, when you think of the complete shutdown that took place, and I don't mean our state of emergency shutdown, I mean when the cancellations started and people were no longer even able to travel to get to destinations like Belize, you were facing the impact long before. I think we very often only talk about the direct impact, but in places like Placencia, you have a lot of other businesses that do suffer just because the tourism industry isn't booming. How would you explain that scenario, Stuart?
I'm not sure I understand, but I mean, you're saying what is
the indirect impact on small businesses in places like Placencia?
Oh, it's huge. Mm-hmm. Whether it's San Pedro, whether it's Placencia, whether it's Hopkins, whether it's even parts of the Cayo district. Mm-hmm. At some point, there's an old saying that economists use. When your neighbor loses her job, it's a recession. When you lose your job, it's a depression. So essentially, the economic impact is spreading throughout the nation's whole economy. If I don't have a job, I'm not going to buy anything that I don't have to buy. It's as simple as that. So it's inevitable that down the line, every business is going to suffer. Down to the taxi driver, down to the grocery store, everybody.
And
Yeah,
have you been?
Marleny?
Yeah.
Just to add to what Stuart said, when you look at the economy, I think we're really learning now just how much the tourism industry really contributes to the economy. I mean, you look at the surpluses of food that has been by the Mennonites. Too much chicken, too much eggs, too much milk, the cows, all of this because the tourism sector is not purchasing in bulk anymore. So it's trickling down to a large, for them to having a large surplus. They don't have that demand. So that gives you a pretty good idea of where we are. And remember, the tourism sector employs about 150,000 people. And these people being laid off, that means people don't have that spending cash. So it will trickle down to every other sector in the country of Belize.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned that you are putting forward proposals as to how to move forward. What is the level of engagement that BTIA has? Is there a committee being put in place? Who's coming up with the action plan as to how we move forward?
I can start to answer that.
Yes.
The tourism sector as a whole, it's a lot of different, has a lot of different parts to it.
Yes.
From cruise, tour operators, hotels, airlines. We're all in contact with each other. And through our research and talking to all our membership, there's a lot of different ideas out there. But the one idea, the one proposal that basically all of our membership has signed off on is the need to take a long-term look at the big picture. Certainly the common denominator has to do with the financing and the provision of long-term low-interest loans, because that's a need that is not being filled. I'm not going to fault the banks. The banks are not set up to provide that kind of financing. They have done a very good job in short-term renegotiation of loans, and that's been a big help for many of us. But again, if you look at this as a long-term problem and not something that just is going to come and go away like a hurricane, that's where we think it's most important to dialogue with government. Government has done a terrific job in meeting the emergency needs of the country, both in terms of the health aspect, which, as you know, we're one of 10 or 12 countries that have remained COVID-free for over a month. That is an unbelievable accomplishment, and the health authorities and government in general should be congratulated, as the general population of the country. But what we have not seen so far is a long-range plan for how to get the economy back on its feet. And I think most people will understand that because the tourism industry plays such a large role in the economy, that's where you have to focus. You have to keep these tourism businesses alive for the next 18 months. Let's take that as an arbitrary amount of time, because if your businesses start to go under, when this thing is all over, there will not be the jobs coming back. If I have 110 employees and I'm no longer in existence, that's 110 more people that are out of a job that will be looking for a job, sorry. And those jobs just won't be there, because whatever you may say, 2019 levels of tourism are not coming back for a number of years. We have to face that.
Now, there's been a lot of hope placed, and people, we definitely hear different parts of the sector talking about opening up air travel once again and allowing tourists to return. When you say that we're not going to get the 2019 levels, are we being, do we have a false optimism about what opening the airport is going to be like?
You use that term, Marleny, not me, but I don't think you're
I'm
far.
asking.
I think in this whole virus, there's a lot of magical thinking going on that we see it certainly when we turn on the news in the United States. But hoping for something and thinking that something is going to happen does not make it happen. If a vaccine was developed tomorrow, that would be the most fantastic thing in the world. But can you bet the survival of your business on a vaccine being created and manufactured and distributed globally tomorrow? I think we have to be realistic about that. And I think the realistic approach is that even if you open the airport tomorrow, we really don't know who will come. It's that simple.
And we know that, shifting a little bit from international travel, we know that, of course, recently restrictions have been lifted to the extent that now Belizeans are being allowed to travel locally, and the Prime Minister has already gone on record to say that the government is now encouraging people to participate and engage in local tourism. Do you foresee that that's going to have a positive impact, at least short term, or if not, how do you think that now that things are starting to open up little by little, is there going to be any relief to the tourism in the sector as a whole?
If you're asking personally as a hotel operator, I think this upcoming 3-day weekend, I think the hotels that are open will do some much needed and much anticipated business. But I look at it more as a morale booster. So we're bringing back some of our laid off staff, and the other hotels are opening, we'll do the same. And that's great for staff morale. It gives people hope. 3-day weekend, that's great. Our next 3-day weekend isn't until September. So we don't know what kind of local business will be done between now and September. I applaud the BTB for pushing it. It's a good idea, but I don't think, I think from an economic standpoint, it's going to be somewhat marginal. There may be certain areas, I would suspect Kikocker might get a bigger boost out of it, say, than San Pedro. But we're dealing with uncharted waters here, and we won't know till we find out.
Yeah. Now, it's not that all properties are reopening for local tourism. John, what would you say is the percentage that is going to open up and those who chose to remain closed?
Well, we conducted a small survey a couple of weeks ago, and most of the properties are more than ready to start their operation. And one of them told me that they need at least 72 hours for them to be able to open. In terms of the total number that are going to be available, I think what was, as Stuart mentioned, many of them are going to be doing the trial run, basically to see how feasible it's going to, economically, it's going to be for them to open to the local travelers. The size of the operation has a lot to do with it. For the bigger properties, they would need a lot more of what the local tourism offers. For the small and medium properties, they have a better chance of being able to, because it's a smaller operation, their operational cost is a lot less than what it would be for a larger property. So in terms of for the smaller properties, I think it's up. It will offer them a good opportunity to receive some much needed revenue so that they can continue to stretch their dollars and to remain in operation. No? But it's hard to say what is the percentage. What we have seen with our members is that we are promoting their special local promotions on our website, and we keep getting more promotions as we go along because we're reaching out to them And this applies to not only to the hoteliers, this applies to the restaurants as well. And even tour operators are getting on board by offering their services at a much lower reduced prices. So we do see the positive economic impact, but we gotta wait and see how long it can remain, because you gotta keep in mind that a lot of people are reducing their monthly salaries, because the private sector in a lot of ways are taking the measures of reducing the employees' monthly salary. I mean, you heard of BG doing that, and I know BTIA has done that with our staff, and I know many other institutions are going to be able to do that. So overall, you have the less disposable income, and this will only increase as time passes, because there will be a lot more people that are going to have less disposable income available to any leisure or any vacation mode.
Yeah. So what I hear from you is that for some places it will be to open for local tourism may actually be at a loss for them, and so some are choosing not to.
Yes, that's the reality. That would be more for the larger properties, because their operations are a lot bigger and they require a lot more staff. So when they have a reduced price, they would need larger number of businesses for them to be able to reach that break-even point and be able to see a little surplus. Yeah. But I think most of them, many of them, I wouldn't say most, I wouldn't want to say most, will be happy to see some level of revenue coming into their properties. I mean, like Stuart mentioned, I think he has a certain good business for this weekend, but then thereafter, what happens?
Yeah, and what you painted, I think, is a very realistic picture. I think people may take advantage of a long weekend, but it's not that we will have tourists moving, or Belizean tourists moving around the country during the week or every weekend. So it will have, there's a limit as to how people will be able to spend. So if we look at what we're facing right now, there's so much uncertainty. You give a measure, Stuart, of 18 months for recovery, and even then we may not be seeing what was looking like it was going to be record-breaking numbers for the season. What are some of the dependent factors? I want to get into your conversation about the financing aspect, but let's look at what operators and owners are looking at externally to be able to kind of gauge what the long-term impact will look like.
Well, the big question, Marleny, is will tourists come back to Belize or come back anywhere? Remember, this is not just a Belizean problem. Nope. This is a global problem. Every country in the world, every prime minister and president in the world, every state governor, mayor of every city is struggling with the exact same problem. And the big question when it comes to tourism is, when will people, in our case in North America, because that's our main market, when will North Americans want to travel again? When they do want to travel again, where will they go to? What modes will they use to travel? Let me give an example by asking you a question. Okay, you've been cooped up for a while. You want to now take this long weekend to go on a vacation. Let's say you want to come down to Placencia, and of course you're going to drive your car and you're going to come have a good time. What if I told you that the only way you could get to Placencia was on a crowded bus or a 4-hour bus ride? Would you still come to Placencia?
No, I wouldn't.
No, probably not. Okay.
Especially if you're getting to a what we're calling ourselves a COVID-free destination, but it requires a risk in being able to travel, and we still don't know what air travel is going to be like. But you talk about the willingness to travel, but what about the economic situation?
Go ahead, John.
No, well, what I was going to say is that there's a percentage of travelers, whether from the US or Canada, which are some of our primary markets, that are going to be able to travel. They are readily willing to travel as we speak now. But at the same time, they want to know that they're safe. They want to know what level of risk they're going to be exposed to. And that is what basically comes down to. right now I'm very happy to know that Belize is positioned in a very good light because we haven't had any cases over the last 30 days. So that puts us in a very good position. The other point that we have on our favor is that we're very close to the US. It's one flight away for them to come to Belize. So that puts Belize in a very good position. But what we need to do is now we need to ensure that we have all the right protocols and guidelines that we're going to follow to ensure that our staff is secure and that the guests are secure by being protected from acquiring this virus.
You know, and I actually wanted to ask more about that. If what sort of conversations have been taking place in terms of the long-term prospects of the industry, because we know, you know, COVID is going to be with us, and it's going to be a reality that we're going to live with for at least the next, you know, few months or so. What what ideas have been thrown around in terms of keeping, balancing, of course, people's economic welfare, but with their health and safety, and what sort of measures are perhaps the industry is going to put in place to, one, keep its people, to keep, you know, employees and all workers safe, and also ensure that people are still going to be able to, you know, enjoy the tourism product and continue travel, because we want to, of course, avoid another outbreak, and we want to keep our vulnerable population safe.
Every tourism business is struggling with that same question, and everybody is in the protocols that they're going to institute to solve that same question that you're asking. And in a way, this early opening for local tourism is a great warm-up for when we open up internationally. And I think that's probably one of the main reasons why the hotels that are opening to local traffic, that's one major reason why we are doing it. Because I don't want to put it in a funny way, but our local guests are kind of going to be guinea pigs for when the foreign guests come. It gives us a chance to test out our protocols. And I think most hotels will be going all out to establish and test those protocols. I think that's the easiest problem to solve. Again, the tough thing is going to be to look at the numbers of visitors that are actually going to come. And I think, as John was saying, they have to evaluate their own risk. And certainly amongst countries outside of North America, Belize is at the top of the list because we're COVID-free and because we're close. That was what John was saying. So in that sense, we're really in a good position, but we still have to get over that larger hump of fear. And we have to be careful here, not just to rely on anecdotal evidence. Okay, so we get calls in our reservations department every day from people who have stayed before or people who already have reservations with us saying, oh, we want to come. When is your hotel going to open? Okay, and if you just base your opinion on that, you would think, man, people are dying to come to Belize. Let's open yesterday because we're going to get all this business. However, when you look at the data done by reputable polling institutions, and this has been documented in many webinars from reputable places, the traveling public in North America is still very fearful. Yeah. And while there are those who will come back, it's not the kind of numbers that are going to be encouraging to the industry, at least not in the beginning. Yeah. So you might be looking at hotels operating at 5 or 10 or 15% occupancy. No hotel can operate at 5 or 10 or 15% occupancy, or tour company or airline. So these are the kind of things that business owners have to grapple with.
Yeah. What I hear you saying is you're breaking down why we need to kind of come to terms that this idea of a rebound in tourism industry isn't as quick as we assume it's going to be. One is definitely whether people will feel comfortable traveling, but also it's for us to be able to clearly acknowledge our risks as well, as we see in the United States, where they've just not been able to get a good handle on containing their outbreak as well.
And that's something we cannot control. That is totally beyond our control.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's not a good position to be in. And I'm trying not to be pessimistic. I'm trying to be more of a realist. That the time to visit your banker is not the day you run out of money. Okay, you need to visit your banker months before you run out of money and have a very frank conversation. And that is essentially what BTIA is saying to the government. A government that has done a great job up until now, and we're saying, all right, let's start to think long-term now. And yes, long-term low-interest financing is just one part of the mix, but that's what we're focusing on right now because that's something that we can all agree on that is going to be necessary to really save the industry in any shape that we would recognize it.
So this proposal that you're putting forward and being able to access financing through international financial institutions, low interest, long term, talk to us of what the recommendation includes in terms of disbursement. There's a limited amount of capital available because everyone across the Caribbean, across the world is trying to figure out a solution. So if we get a certain amount of capital available, how would you imagine that would work for so many places that will need the assistance?
You have to start somewhere. I mean, ideally, in other words, government accesses IDB, CDB, World Bank, IMF, those kind of institutions, because that finance can only be accessed through a government. Just how at the beginning of the crisis, Mr. Barrow enumerated different international financial institutions that have expressed a willingness to work with us.
Yes.
What we are saying now that those funds, well, will hopefully arrive, but that the institutions provide the kind of help that a government asks for. What I'm saying, it's time for government to sit down with the private sector, with the tourism industry and say, all right, for your long-term survival, what are the kind of things that will help you the most? And I'm saying those same institutions that are helping provide emergency food aid and poverty aid also have windows open for long-term low-interest loans. And that's all we're saying is that's where we think the thinking should be going now. Yeah. In terms of administration, you have institutions like the DFC that are perfectly capable of administering these kind of loans. Now, the implications of your question are, there will never be enough money to go around. Well, there will never be enough money to go around.
No, I think my question is, what do you propose in terms of how people will access and that those who are in the greatest need will be able to access first?
For any loan, there's criteria, whether you're borrowing from the credit union, from the bank, or from your best friend, you have to establish criteria. We're not talking about a bailout or people or institutions handing out money. There are procedures. These loans are going to have to be collateralized and otherwise secured. The institution that is supervising the lending is going to have to look at your company's financials. It's going to look at its history. If you're a company that just started out 6 months ago, chances are you're not going to be at the head of the line for that kind of assistance. There may be a different window for small businesses, a different window for large businesses, because the risk entailed is different for those different kinds of propositions. But this is nothing new. I mean, it's not a great technical challenge to administer a long-term loan program.
Yeah. You know, as you're speaking, what comes to mind is the local institutions had spoken about the relief efforts that they were offering, and I know it was usually a personal negotiation with your banking relationship officer, but they had initially said 3 months in moratoriums, in looking at relief in overdraft What happens at the end of these 3 months?
That's why we're making the proposal we're making.
Yeah. No, I'm serious. Let's think of the operators who are taking advantage of this 3-month relief. At some point, even the local banking institutions will have to close off from the relief that they're offering. What do you imagine will happen if that is the scenario?
Well, in the first instance, you try and stretch the 3 months to 6 months. What exacerbates the problem in Belize is that we are a high interest jurisdiction. They argue forever about why the interest rates are so high in Belize, but let's leave that alone for a minute. Trying to operate in a climate of high interest rates for a business, that means when you borrow money, and virtually every business needs to borrow money to develop its business, your margin of error, if you're paying 8, 9, 10, 11, 12% interest rate per annum, your margin of error is tiny in the best of circumstances. Everything has to go right for you to succeed in business when you're borrowing at those interest rates. Now you throw in the crisis, okay? So you're getting a moratorium, but this is not a free moratorium. This is a moratorium, let's say it's a moratorium on all payments, but the interest continues to run. It's just like maxing out your credit card, okay? At some point, that interest upon interest is not helping you. It's hurting you. So again, I'm not faulting the banks. They have their own considerations to take care of. They have to stay in business too. The last thing we would ever want to see in this country is a bank failure.
Yeah.
Just like I think in the tourism industry, the last thing we'd ever want to see is one of our local airlines or both of our local airlines going out of business. That happens, and you're really talking about massive carnage for the future of the industry. So even before the hotel industry, I'd say let's take a close look at the airline industry. Those guys have to keep going. Yeah. It's all very interrelated. The banks will play a large role, but infinite moratoriums from the local banks is really not the answer to our problem.
Yeah, and probably not realistic either. So we're looking at one recommendation, and that's being able to access low-interest, long-term loans through financing that is offered from international financial institutions. What else are you envisioning will be of some assistance to the entire sector, from the small business operators right up to the large business operators, and even some of those who are hoping, investors and people who have been hoping to open up this year or next year?
Marleny, everyone has their ideas, and the first thing people focus on is, let us not pay GST, let us not pay business tax, let us not pay Social Security. It's kind of a tax-based approach.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that's a great way to go, because I recognize that government needs its own funds. When government is broke, all of us suffer. I think the thing, looking from a BTIA point of view and from a private sector point of view, and even from the larger national picture, is I think we need to look at the labor law situation. Okay, Belize has a set of labor laws. Those laws, everyone, even the labor commissioner agrees, those laws were not created with a crisis like this in mind. Okay, so boom, this thing comes down, and suddenly every employer in the country is trying to go through their dusty old labor book and look at the law and what I can do, what I can't do. But this all came so suddenly that basically it was I won't say panic mode, but everyone was looking at what can I do. The result is twofold. Because many employers acted hastily with good reason, because we had to act hastily, both to help our employees and help our own businesses. We did things that, let's say, were not exactly in accordance with the existing regulations. I mean, as you know, if you're going to formally dismiss someone, you have to go through a number of steps, whether it's for cause, whether it's not for cause. it depends upon what papers they signed to begin with, but all did things that maybe were not exactly according to Hoyle, but they were necessary. I think we need to make sure, and this is from the governmental point of view again, we need to very quickly take this as a very serious crisis and say, you know what, let's use common sense to figure out how both employers and employees can have their status regularized without causing indelible harm to either side. So that's part number one. Let's look back, see what we've done, get that straightened out, and to everyone's mutual satisfaction. But the second half of that is now, in preparing for the future, we really need to make labor laws more flexible to cope with the new way that industry is going to run. No place is going to go back to run the way it was before. Just how over the last couple decades you've had, let's say, the security business. Ago, industries or businesses used to hire their own security guard.
Yeah.
Got an old guy with a rusty shotgun that's standing out in front of your business, probably falling asleep. Now we've moved to hiring security companies. So we contract out a lot of that business. Unless the labor laws change, we may wind up contracting out large segments of the tourism industry. I might contract out my kitchen labor. I might go to a company that's going to supply me with housekeepers. So I'm not employing 15 housekeepers. I have a contract with a company that hires housekeepers. So it gets me out of the employment business. And that may be a way we have to go, but I don't think it's the best way. I think if we made our labor laws more flexible, it would be better for everyone.
Yeah. Would you be a bit more specific and explain what type of challenges you run into when your property closed, or other hotels, when the properties closed, as to whether or not you would lay off, whether they were furloughed? I know one of the main conversations was in a state of emergency because it's imposed by government that employees, in fact, did not need to, it was not mandated that they had to be paid.
Well, you asked for examples. Let me give you a couple very pertinent, specific examples. Okay, so when this thing hit, my first reaction, having fortunately spoken to Social Security Board in a BTIA seminar that we conducted, we learned that if you keep an employee on for 8 hours a week, they still stay on the Social Security rolls. There's no danger if they get sick or anything like that. So my first plan was to keep all of my employees on for at least 8 hours a week. They didn't even have to necessarily do much work, but if 8 hours would keep them on the Social Security rolls, they were still employed, they wouldn't have a break in service, and 8 hours a week I could afford to do. I'm not sure how long, but I knew I could do it to a certain extent. Okay, now along comes, virtually within a few days of my decision there, government says, hey, we've got this relief program going of $75 a week for 12 weeks. But if you are still employed, you are not eligible for the $75 a week.
Yeah.
So now I have to go back to the drawing board and say, wow, I can't, this 8 hour thing it doesn't make sense because my employees will make more money if I dismiss them, and they can then collect the government $75 a week instead of 8 hours a week times $6 or $7 an hour, let's say. It made sense for the employee. It made sense for the employer. Okay, but it meant that I had to send those employees home in order to get their government help. Okay, then the next thing that comes down is the lockdown, where you could not travel from your home to your place of work. So at that point, let's say half of my workers are commuting from Mango Creek, from Santa Cruz, from wherever. I have to tell them, or they have to tell me, boss, I can't come in because government says I can't, there's no buses, I can't drive my private vehicle, so they can't come to work. So the question is, are they resigning because they can't come? Or am I firing them because they can't come? You can't really answer that question. But the fact is they're out of work, but they don't want to be dismissed. They don't want to lose their seniority toward severance. And so these are questions that all of us had to grapple with just in a very short space of time. And you do the best you can, but mistakes are going to be made. There were other hotels that have been open a long, long time that if they dismissed every employee, employees who have been there sometimes 10, 20, 30, 40 years, and the severance pay that they've accumulated, who can afford to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars in severance? So you make your arrangements that might not be entirely according to what the regulations say, but you got to have some flexibility. And it's a very real problem that virtually every employer in the tourism industry is dealing with.
Yeah, and I think outside of tourism, I heard quite a few of those exact examples in other forms of private sector as well. So there were many difficult decisions to be faced. So looking now, moving forward at the labor law to ensure that there is enough room that in this type of emergency where no one can predict, there is some kind of space for you to be able to make solutions that work best for both the employer and employee. Let me divert back to your suggestion in terms of financing, because now that you've mentioned your employees, clearly when people hear conversations like this, they'll think, okay, well, the business is protected, but what about us as the worker? What does that mean for us?
Marleny, every person out there that has lost their job does not want, in the first instance, a handout or a food basket. They want their job back. The only way people are going to get their jobs back is if the people who employ them are in a state of financial health that allows them to bring their employees back. It's that simple. It's not employer versus employee. Both employers and employees want the same exact thing. They want to survive and eventually prosper. Nobody is arguing with that. That's why we have to look at the big picture.
Yeah. And your current staff, how much have you had to cut down?
Out of a staff of 110, Marleny, we had to lay off 81. We've kept 29. The security, some landscaping, some maintenance, that kind of thing. Food and beverage, just to feed the 29 employees that are still there. So we've got 29 employees out of 110 still working with us, probably half of whom have had their pay reduced by 20%. That's where we stand.
And that would be the same situation all around, John?
Yeah, I mean, that's the reality I've been hearing from members from across the country in all destinations, from Toledo to Cayo, Corozal, Rinjoaki. I mean, and those number one and number two destinations, San Pedro and Kikakar, they can tell you they're going to increase the number of persons that are going to be relieving. It's inevitable. And this is what we're trying to propose right now, that government gets on board with the private sector. Let us look at long-term financing that can be made available. Let's revise the labor laws to see how they can benefit the employees and the employers. We gotta look at what would be a suitable date for opening the border. Let's have things in place so that we can protect ourselves, the population, the staff, and the tourists when the time comes to visit Belize and to be able to access Belize. But I can tell you, we have to accept the fact that not all businesses are going to be able to survive. It's unfortunate to say that and to think of that. But that's the reality. Many of them did not see this coming. Many of them had just done some refinancing, had just acquired new assets, they have expanded their operations, and overnight they are down from earning $1,000 a month to earning $0 a month. And then you don't know for how long. So as I mentioned earlier, the longer we don't have the full tourism industry open for business, the more it's gonna trickle down to people not being employed, and for more and more tourism businesses to shut down.
And speaking of the borders opening back, something especially that Marleny said earlier is that perhaps our traditional tourist market, or the countries where we usually see the most numbers from, and I'm talking specifically now about the U.S., Canada as well, the U.K., are experiencing extreme difficulties in managing their situations. So even if the border does open up, there is still, especially if we're looking in the next few months, there would be sort of a high level of risk of exposure and bringing COVID possibly back into the country. I'm wondering if there's a possibility that we might see, or if there's any ideas for us perhaps to shift and expand into new tourism markets. I don't know, perhaps maybe regionally. We're looking at South America, maybe other parts of the world. Are there any sort of ideas floating around as to how, when the border opens up, the tourism is going to be managed, and the areas which we might be looking to get people from?
I mean, remember that this is a global phenomenon that we're experiencing. The pandemic is global. So in terms of finding new markets, there really won't be new markets. What we have to look at for Belize to be able to open its borders is that we have to look at what is an acceptable level of risk that we would be willing to take to open our borders. And when I say that, it means that what measures are we going to put in place to, upon arrival, whether they come by land, air, or sea, in place to be able to secure our population and to secure the tourists. What is going to be in place to minimize the level of risk? I mean, that is key factor that we have to look into so that we are able to determine by when. And this will lead also to, because a lot of people are very keen on knowing when the international borders will be open. Yeah. I mean, this is something that we gotta trust the government, and we gotta trust that the government is looking at the economic and the health impacts and trying to find a balanced decision. If you're gonna tell us that you're gonna open until October and not July because the risks are too high, that's part of the conversation, but we have to look at the other components. So, and that's why we're saying, what financing are you going to be able to provide for us so that we can keep our staff employed, and so that we can, in a way, keep the economy moving and not remaining stagnant or coming to a complete halt. So this is where we want to be able to have these discussions, these planning sessions with the government, so that we can have this economic recovery plan in place. And as we mentioned, I mean, tourism is comprising of 40% of GDP. You know how it trickles down to the other sectors. So by giving the focus to the tourism sector, you will be able to assist the other sectors of the economy as well. So in terms of finding the other markets, I think we have a very good understanding of who our key markets are and where we were expanding. What we need to look at now is what is the suitable level of risk that we as a nation would be willing to take for us to be able to open the borders. And we know that there's some work going on to develop protocols and guidelines that the businesses can implement to protect themselves and to protect the tourists. But we need to have a good idea of what the recovery plan will be.
Yeah. And just a question here in terms of what the operators are saying about a potential opening of air travel come July. Are they all comfortable with that, considering the fact that we make it to that date with no new cases?
From our members, it's hard to say. I mean, most of them are saying yes, they're readily available to open in July. Like I mentioned, I did a survey a couple of weeks ago, and that was the phenomenon. But you look at it now, and the people's perspective changes by day, especially when you look at what's happening in the neighboring countries. When you see what's happening in Mexico, Mexico is beginning to get out of hand right now with a number of people ill with the virus and the number of deaths. You look at Guatemala as well. You look at the U.S. is still not under control, and it being our primary market. I mean that we cannot deny that fact. That the U.S. remains. It's about 70 to 75% of our tourist arrivals. So that presents a lot of complications in terms of opening the border, and we've been able to start in July. The PM, as you have mentioned, he's looking to have a rapid test. That is a lot of that decision of opening the international border relies on having that rapid test. And even with the rapid test being available, we're still going to be at risk.
Yeah.
How are we going to be able to? How willing are we to manage that risk?
Yeah. Yeah. Now, and the health officials have clearly outlined how that would also bring challenges to, depending on where they take the test, in the point of embarkation or disembarkation. And the hope in local tourism, is there, I know Stuart mentioned that this is a long weekend. People tend to travel when they have more time. Interestingly, New Zealand just moved to 4-day work week, so they have longer weekends to encourage local travel there. Some people, those are some of the innovative ideas we see in other places. If we do end up in a situation where we can't open the air borders, just what can we do to really enhance some sort of benefit to come out of local travel?
Well, I mean, that example that you gave about New Zealand is a good example of a strategy thinking outside the box.
Yes.
And this is what our government has to look into, and the private sector has to look into. What can we do to promote local travelers? I'm very pleased to see how low the price of fuel is right now. That is an incentive for people to consider traveling from Cayo to Toledo, from San Pedro to Hopkins, because it's a little bit more affordable and less costly for you. So we really got to begin to look at those strategies to look at it, and with the way our labor laws are structured, it would require that adjustment for us to be able to say, well, we're going to have 4 working weeks, 4 days working week as being the new norm, so that people have long weekends, so that people can plan for long weekend vacations, have the opportunity to move around. Yeah. So we really have to zoom in and begin to have those discussions and really narrow into what would work for the needs.
Yeah. It's going to take a lot of creative thinking and perhaps even trial and error, I think, to be able to come up with solutions. In closing, gentlemen, I think that it's very grim when we have the conversation about the tourism industry, just because it was kind of an instantaneous fatal blow. But I'm sure that by virtue of your recommendations in conversations with operators, you do have to remain optimistic. What is your source of hope right now? What makes you feel that it won't be today, it may not be till next year, but what makes you optimistic that there will be eventually a rebound? Stuart?
We don't have any choice but to be optimistic, Marleny. We're human beings. I think by nature, don't want to give up. All I would say, though, is just a couple of things. One, we have to stay calm and we have to stay smart.
Yeah.
Smart and strong and safe. You can't panic. You have to keep working at it. We're smart enough and strong enough to beat this. Number two, it sounds pretty strange, but Belize has always been a very lucky country. If I had my choice, I'll take luck over brains any day. And I think if a combination of luck and brains is going to get us through this. But if I may one more thing, especially in the social media age, it's very easy to be a critic, to point fingers, to say, oh, here's what we need to do, and why don't we do this and all that. Try and put yourself in the shoes of our decision makers and our national leaders. We can have our quarrels with our politicians all day, and those quarrels are legitimate. But you know what? We have elected people just for this reason, to to get us through a crisis. And I happen to think, and I think most objective people would realize that people like the Prime Minister, people like Carla Barnett, people like Chris Coy, people like Dr. Manzanero, the people who have performed in this crisis so far, I don't see how you can say anything but that they've done a good job. So at some point, we've got our generals and our colonels. We have to place our faith in them, and they're going to make mistakes. And we might make other recommendations, but you know what? There comes a point when you have to put your faith in your leadership. I think we're lucky to have the leadership from both parties, and let's go with it. The last thing we want to do is get back into partisan bickering and social media stupidity. I think we need unity, and let's stand behind our leaders. And trust me, I'm not the person who would normally say that.
Yeah, I'm very well aware of that. John?
Marleny, it's not the end of the world. We believe in comparison to what is happening around the world, we're still in a very good position. We have been very fortunate to only experience the death of two Belizeans. We have zero COVID at this point, so there are a lot of good things. And we have already seen how we can come together, unite, and be able to approach this holding hands, to make the best decision. We have to give credit to the government of Belize for establishing that national oversight committee that basically embraced everyone. So everybody was able to share their views, their recommendations, and to be able to be a part of the table to make these decisions and to continue still working on those decisions. I think that is a very good sign of how times can change, how things can improve, how a united front can really overcome any challenge or any obstacle, especially for a small nation like Belize. I think that it has set a new foundation for what the future decision-making process will be, whereby you have bipartisan support from all areas of the economy. And Belize, I know we're experiencing hard times, difficult times, but we're coming together. I know a lot of people are adapting. I've seen some of the creative stuff that Belizeans are doing, going to their farming, going into providing free services to a lot of people and reducing their prices. And this is what we have to do. And I think everybody in Belize, we are all a small family, and we understand what we need to do to overcome and to recover.
All right. Well, thank you very much for checking in with us this morning, and we really do all hope that we can be able to see some solutions, some assistance, and something that will be able to get the tourism sector on better footing. Thank you very much, and stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you. Enjoy the day.
We're going to go ahead and take a break, and when we come back, we'll be checking in on the Chiquibu. We'll have the representative of Friends for Conservation and Development talking about the forest fires they've been facing. So please stay tuned.
This COVID update was brought to you by Fulltech Systems, your technology center, where you'll come for the price, but stay for the service. Our Fulltech
And we're now shifting focus to talking about some of the protected areas of Belize. Now, if you've been following the news over the past couple of weeks, you know that we have had particular difficulties with forest fires over some of the forested and protected areas of our country. We've seen some significant damage. So here to give us an update as to the status of some of these areas, we have joining us Rafael Manzanero, who is the Executive Director of Friends for Conservation and Development. Good morning, Rafael, and thanks for joining us.
Hi, good morning, Gavin, and good morning. So we are set here this morning, yes, to speak a little bit more about the fires and some of the challenges in the Chiquibul, I gather.
Yes. So perhaps, let's start with the Chiquibul. To what extent did we see damage and we see fires and let's say that, let's just start there and ask what extent of damage we saw in the Chiquibul due to the fires.
Yes, we did an analysis until the month of April the 21st. And when we started to look at the imagery in terms of the satellite imagery, ground shooting, and aerial reconnaissance, as a result of all of that information gathered, we were able really to make an approximate extension of area that was covered by the forest fires in the Caracol and the Chiquibul National Park. I must say that it's for the very first time that we have seen so much devastation in a very limited amount of time. Practically based on the results that we have observed, and mindful that that's not really a full sort of an assessment because we took it until the 21st of April. But what we saw is that in the Caracol alone, the Caracol Archaeological Reserve, there was over 2,000 acres of forest that was basically impacted along an extension of land. Although some of the areas were already altered, I must say, so it was not like all 2,000 acres of virgin forest. And I think that's important to note because some of this has also been degraded over the years. But the extension of the fires, the area that it was able to cover was basically over 2,000 acres. Okay. In the Chiquibul National Park, it was another 2,000 acres or so. So in reality, we are looking at over 4,000 acres of area that was covered by the forest fires in both the Caracol and the Chiquibul National Park.
And in terms of the impact of that kind of damage, what are some of the effects that environmentally we've seen so far that have happened as a result of such devastating fires?
I feel one of the things that and I think that for sure the Belizean public here, particularly the Cayo district, what they were basically suffering more was really more the air that was basically more filled in with smoke. The forestry department had been basically trying to contain the fires in the Baca Forest Reserve, which was even much more closer to these towns and villages. And the main purpose of firefighting in the Baca was for it not really to escalate into the Chiquibul National Park, because that would have been even much more intense, the amount of smoke that would have been reaching down into these areas. So for one, it really had to deal with a health issue, but also, of course, the impacts on biodiversity. And up until now, in Marleny, we have not been able to document the impacts. It's really difficult, but I feel that there are some formulas that we can be able probably to come about in the near future. Yeah. The impacts of the forest, of course, the destruction, the carbon emissions, which we spoke about that also the last time. Yeah. If some of these forested areas are impacting along the riverbanks, along the streams, then of course that also has a wider effect in terms of the water quality. So it has a lot really to do in terms of the environmental impacts that one can see overall. But we don't have a monetary figure. In other words, we cannot really come up with a number to say how much were the losses, and I wish that we could do that, because probably that's going to elevate the sort of the eyes amongst the decision makers that in reality the impacts are quite large. And hopefully with a number it might be able to indicate more clearly what were really the losses. In the back, we have been now trying really to get more accurate figure from the farmers, who lost their crops, who lost, in fact, a couple of shelters were burnt. So all of this probably we can amass also in terms of looking at the economical loss.
Now, the key issue here is that while you've always suspected or pretty much known that the source of these fires coming from across the border, we know that your board member, Tony Rath, recently penned an article with images and kind of showing the situation that you're facing there, specifically in the Vaca area. Raf, this is just another item added to the list of the threats that the reserve that you help to protect faces. You've documented everything from cattle ranching, deforestation, when it was chate, poaching. The list is so long. Now you're adding the impact of forest fires. So while you may have had a quantum before, you just know that the total loss is only growing. You said you hope that decision makers would be able to hear or see or acknowledge the impact. What's been your interaction level or your advocacy to them at this time?
Well, we did have a joint forces meeting last week, and it became even much more kind of urgent, really, to address the matter of cattle ranching, because you see, Marleny, the fires is really more the sort of the medium towards the end of the action. In other words, forest fires are being created and or destructive in that landscape, but technically the end result on why they are doing it is because either for agricultural farming or more primarily for cattle ranching. So we need really to deal with that matter.
So they're clearing forests so they have a pasture for the cattle. That's what you suspect is happening.
Exactly, that's correct. And so even the story that came out last week about the Guatemalan that was captured, he basically notes the fact that he is now trying really to get a little piece of land within Belizean territory in the Chiquibul National Park, because otherwise all the other areas have been taken up by big farmers who don't really live in those villages. These guys live like in the towns, like Melchor de Mencos, like Poctun. So you won't find them on the landscape, but they own big areas either in both Belize and in Guatemala, of course. And so the poor farmer no longer knows where to go. So the cattle ranching, and we have been reporting this for quite some time now, Mark, as how you reckon, probably over the last 4 or 5 years. But cattle ranching is still a major problem, and what we see, the destruction of the Maya forest, which basically is an entire, ecosystem. That area, the large part of it is disappearing because of cattle ranching, and so is the case of what we have been registering along the western border.
And do we have an idea of sort of the extent of land that may have been cleared currently by some of these illegal farmers in these illegal farms in protected areas?
Well, we normally do reconnaissance from the Benqueviejo zone way down to Jalacte, which basically is about 90 kilometers of the western border. What we can say is that if there's that 1 kilometer, what is known as the adjacency zone, that area largely has been over the years being occupied by agricultural farming and now becoming the trend of cattle ranchers. So if you look at that acreage, in terms of that extent of that western border. There are some areas that have even passed through the 1 kilometer. And these fires, for example, that were able to crisscross even the Sebada Road, which is one of the access points to go to one of the CPs. In some of the areas, the fires reach up to 3.1 kilometers within Belizean territory. Okay, that does not really mean that all of that area is being occupied by cattle ranchers. What it means is that if left alone, of course, that area would basically be taken over. And I was speaking with one of my colleagues from the Institute for Archaeology last night, and I was informing him that, pretty much soon, if we are not really as rigorous and as determined, then cattle ranchers will reach very and perhaps right behind the temples of Kana in the Caracol Ecological Reserve, because that is the one that is really more heavily impacted as you look throughout that landscape. So the acreage is, I don't have it right now in terms of the acreage being occupied, but certainly what we can say is that even though as we were in a state or are in a state of emergency here with the pandemic, Guatemalans are not really just laying low. And in fact, we can see that progressively there can be a much more aggressive stance of looking for new lands and really to do their crops. So we have to be very much more aware about this. And of course, what will be really the deterrence is, of course, the patrols.
Well, I was just going to get to that, because one of the things you've always clearly communicated is that when we start seeing the establishment of cattle ranching, you're looking then at a completely different type of interaction that may take place, because it's not just the farmer. Oftentimes, because of the ties that cattle ranchers may have to other illicit activities, they may be in fact a lot more dangerous.
Yes, because of course they are more organized, and when we started really in 2007, 2008 with dealing in the Chiquibo, you have seen that there has been a sort of a developing trend of activity starting from chateros. Chateros, in a way, were really more local community members from those villages. They would have a machete and they would be just hiking and walking through the forest finding this plant. Now it has been evolving, even though the human footprint is not really as extensive. In other words, we don't see the network of tracks and trails within Belizean territory as before. So they are really much more kind of fine-tuned to particular areas, particularly along the western border. But now we are dealing with new elements. I feel then that we need to be much more, as how I mentioned before, I think that the presence is still, the CPs are now out there. So we have the sort of the structures in place, the men on the ground, and we just have to continue doing the hard work. Some of these areas, Marleny, are highly inaccessible. We fully understand that. It's really difficult to go there. The only way to reach is basically, of course, walking, hiking down into those mountains. But we have to do it. That work has to be done. And that was really the sort of the mission of the Joint Forces unit. The idea of collaborating and working together to deal with this issue. Of course, we deal with environmental matters. We deal with environmental security because we are basically the co-managers of this area, and so we have to do this thing jointly. As then the national security forces look at it from a national security viewpoint, and so the kind of the magic of really being able to contain this is, of course, really to do much more of that aggressive work as a team, as a unit on the ground.
Okay. Now, I can't help but thinking, when you do encounter people who are in the area, we are also in a completely different time. What type of safety measures do you have if you do run into, whether it's a farmer or someone who's illegally trespassed into Belize? We know that across the border there are increasing cases of COVID-19. Is that a part of your reality too, in how you're now addressing the situation?
It is a very much part of the reality. You will know that in Guatemala, yes, it has been increasing. There are areas now that have now even Isabel and other areas. I heard the alcalde from San Luis, which is really right along those areas where we are operating on from the Belizean context. We know that San Luis already has registered its cases also. So you are right that, and this was something that we have been discussing for over I would say, of several weeks ago. If we would be supported really to go in and be able to do detainments of people across or along that landscape because of the same issue, bringing them out.
Yeah, let me just interject there, Raf, so people can understand clearly. So you go out on a patrol. If you encounter a Guatemalan who is in the Chiquibo for whatever one of the reasons, we know they come in for so many different things, you then have to detain them there and then trek them out to where you get the vehicle, and then you drive them into San Ignacio for them to be able to be charged. That's a lot of interaction just within, just to be able to get one person charged. How do you protect yourself and your men in that time?
Yeah, so what we would do, of course, those are the basic rules that we would follow here. Of course, the distancing, and also we need to ensure that the face masks now, for example, this Guatemalan that was captured, he did not really have any face masks. Although in Guatemala, it is a rule all across the country. Everybody has to wear one. That is even worse than here in Belize. So, but of course, this guy did not really have any. We had to provide him with that, particularly bringing him into our vehicle and putting him into custody of the police. All of that we had to ensure that this person was going to be handed in properly, and that the police department or the forestry department would feel, pretty much I would feel, or at least they would feel fine that we are doing it properly. Yeah. But that's what we have to do, and certainly it is a long distance, and it depends on where we are doing some of these activities on the ground. In Rio Blanco, it takes 2.5 days to reach down here. We normally arrive here early in the morning, 1-2 o'clock in the morning. Just being able to bring out an individual, and we have to ensure that the person is also healthy. So we would have to do the check-in on the individual's health, and we tend to do that at Tapir Camp, which is our main headquarters in the Chiquibo, before the person is moved down, and that happens all the time. Ensuring that the person is healthy, ensuring that the person has been fed, ensuring that the person is well hydrated. All of that thing we have to do. Because we don't also, and apart from the COVID, but we also have to ensure that the person is being treated with all its rights as an individual. Humanely. All of these things have to be done.
Yeah, and what's the level of support you do get from the other members of, perhaps the government, the security forces? What is the relationship like, especially when you have to handle a situation like that?
Well, with the Ministry of National Security, over some time, or in the beginning of the pandemic, we were not really being encouraged to do any particular patrols into those areas. I think there was much more a higher limitation upon what to do. In fact, we recalled our rangers out from the CPs for a period of time. For almost a month, we had to move in our guys from those conservation posts. Only the military stayed there in those areas. But frankly, the idea of the Joint Forces Unit, we all have limited resources. We have always understood that. The border, the western border, is as how we have always described it as being porous. There are areas that are highly inaccessible. Hard work to reach there. but that's where the hotspots are. So we would hope that yes, there could be a much more improvement of that joint forces effort. We have discussed this very much with the Belize Defense Force. In fact, the Belize Defense Force has the highest manpower with us any day out there in the Chiquibu.
Yeah.
We have spoken with the police, we have spoken with forestry, because those are the other players on the ground. And when any of those other are not there, then somebody else has to do that work.
Yeah.
And many times it then lies on XCD to do that work in terms of upholding the rule, upholding the regulations. And that, I think, is pretty much where we are now, at a point where we need really to further discuss that. I think many people over the years, and Marleny, you can allude to that more, that many people tend to believe that we are a national security agent, but we are not.
No.
We are an environmental security program. I mean, that's really our job. Of course, the threats that the Chiquibu has, the Chiquibu forest, including Caracol, it is a transboundary issue. And so we always have to work it along with the security agencies of Belize. And so the work becomes much more lighter if everybody is able to pull their weight in that sense.
Yeah. Well, Raphael, we do hope, and I know this is not a one-time advocacy issue for you. You make it a point of being able to communicate these messages calmly and being able to have people be aware of the situation, to understand the need. It is a critical time. And it's not just about the health, it's also looking at that we can mitigate the situation that's happening at the border with the cattle ranching and the other illegal activities taking place there. So we do hope that you're able to get some support sooner rather than later.
Yes, certainly, yeah. Thanks so much, Marleny, for that, and I think that has been really our main kind of message always. We want really to bring the facts home. It is very, very difficult, and I feel that not so many people have the opportunity. But if you go out there as a Belizean and look at what is really happening out there, it certainly will drag you to try to do something. And that something is what we are trying now really to push furthermore. We had been over the last few years, probably it took us, probably about 5 years, Marleny, for us to gain recovery of the forest by a 10.5%. That took us many years.
Yeah, yeah.
In a couple of days, that forest fire just went and ravaged everything.
Yeah.
So the point here is we need really to ensure that we don't slip away from understanding that there is a true problem out there. People are going to start to get more desperate, or perhaps are already desperate, and so the poverty levels are going to increase. In Guatemala, it's going to escalate, particularly along that area where the Chiquibu and the Caracol and the Vaca and Columbia River are situated. So people will be searching for lands.
Yeah.
And
so this is really the opportune time to get it under control.
Yes, we need really to ensure that we can be able to strategize and be able to, even though if we have the limited resources, then the question is, what do we do with that limited force that we have out there to make it much more effective? And that is really the center of our discussions now that we are having. Hopefully it is not for too late, that we can be able to do this. I was just going to leave you with one final message, here, Marleny.
Yes.
If I may. A couple of weeks ago, there was a discovery of opium in Chiquibu.
Oh.
And I don't know if it was really the first registered report of that, but opium means that it is no longer only marijuana that people will want to plant on the Belizean landscape. So it brings us back again to that question that we cannot let this thing slip away. We have to ensure that we are able to do it jointly as an effort out there.
Yeah.
Um,
That's a very serious situation. Of course, when you start moving into, I'd imagine, and from what I've read, when you move into more of the high value drugs, there's a lot more danger that comes along with the situation.
yeah, that's correct. And so I think we are at that level now of discussion, and I certainly would want, because that's all what we are saying, at the end, only to reiterate it, anyone who wants to go out there to see it, like a Tony Rath who was able to see it, then of course it urges you to ask, what else do we have to do?
Yeah.
Because that is really the point. Not many people go out there to see it. So we need really to embrace a high level of people really to discuss this and be able to come up with a strategy that we have to elevate those kind of efforts out there. I think we do it, the people, we are a co-manager to those resources, we are only one of them. There are so many of the other heroes across this country that are trying really to do, like Will Mejia and from Nicola Will from WCS. As an environmentalist, I mean that is what we basically come at heart on, of wanting to do something. And for us as FCD, it is natural resources, only that it is right along the western border too. So we have to be able to do this thing together as a joint effort.
All right. Well, thank you once again for bringing us the latest as to what's happening there. Do take care, Rafael.
Yes, certainly. Yeah, thanks so much. Appreciate it. You have a good day.
You too. There you have it, the latest that's happening there. I think, we know that there are a number of threats that are that we have seen over the years in the Chickabull, illegal crossings for a range of activities, and now when we talk about some of the more high-risk activities that are taking place, it clearly is a time that there has to be that strategy put in place that he is advocating for. But what we're going to do now is shift gears, and actually parents, it's a great time to get the kids in front of the television, because guess who's coming up next?
It's Ozzy the Clown.
Oh, you so didn't say that like a child. Say it again.
Oh, like a child?
Yeah.
It's Ozzy.
That's right. That's how they're feeling.
I know, right?
So the kids get to come in front of the television because we have Ozzy coming up next, and also kids time. So please do stay tuned. we're back.
Yeah, we hope you got the kids are on the TV.
Yes, you have very little time left. Get them in front of the television because we are about to have our own in-house edition of the Ozzy Show. And you can hear his excitement. Here's the thing. We know that Ozzy launched his show, it's what, a month now?
Yes.
A month ago, he decided to go live and keep the kids entertained while they were out of school. And it's definitely taken off. And so we want to see a little bit of what he has to offer in his regular shows. So Ozzy, you have the floor. Go ahead.
Oh my. All for me?
Do your magic.
All for me.
Let's
Okay. Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Channel 5, for having me here. Marleny, Stephanie, and all you guys, you've always been the person pushing me. Gavin, well, from a little guy, he's been holding on to my legs and saying, go, go, go. So I want to thank everybody and all my fans who are out there who have always been inspiration to Ozzy, because you have certainly been an inspiration to let me get going with the show. Mentioning a couple of names like Brent Toombs, Kim Vasquez, who have been pushing me forward, and I want to say thank you. Now the opportunity exists, and I'm here for you guys. And I'm so happy to be here. And you know what? Every now and then, Javier takes over. But it's Ozzy Show today. Yes, so I want to invite everybody. Tune into www.facebook.com/OZZYBZE to see the show. And it airs on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 2:30 on those days. You want to tune in. You don't want to miss anything, because I'm going to show you some of the things that we do on the show. Normally, even Charlie is losing weight. He says things tough out there. He can't find nothing to eat. People eat everything when they find. Wait, what is it, Charlie? You smell food? Oh, it's Marleny. Marleny, it's you. Yeah, it's you, Marleny. All right. Hey, relax. Give me a kiss. Come on. All right, let's put you down. Okay, and Charlie is gone. Now, boys and girls, what I want to do, what do I have here? Well, I have a balloon. But before I go into this, I want to encourage everybody to keep using your mask. See, even Ozzy uses his mask. And I have some masks that I'll be giving away if you tune into the show. All right? But make sure you keep using your mask. Don't forget to keep washing your hands. It's very important. It's the new norm. Wash your hands everywhere you go. Make sure you get your sanitizer. And we've been doing washing hands over and over. But just so you remember. Oh, nails, thumbs, wrists. You didn't forget that. I'm going to have a competition one of these days. I also want to encourage everybody to remember the Ozzy Challenge exists. And boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, all you people out there in TV world, the Ozzy Challenge has gone to great heights. Tune in tomorrow and you'll see how high it has gone. And I want to tell you, I'm hoping Channel 5, people from Channel 5 will do the Ozzy Challenge so we can air it on the show too. People like Stephanie, Marleny, Gavin, Rick, even maybe Miss Amalia. That would be great. So remember, the Ozzy Challenge, submit it, and you can submit it to the Ozzy Show, TheOzzyShowBZE@gmail.com. Submit your videos to that email address and we'll get them and we'll air them, okay? But let's get back into what we're going to do here. I'm going to do an experiment first. We use recycling materials. We don't get stuff to... I went into the garbage and got this one out. So it's a Coca-Cola. Well, it should have been a Coca-Cola bottle. Not promoting Coca-Cola, but I'm mentioning it because it's their bottle. I hope Boyd and Boyd can give me a little sponsor sometime. You know how it goes. We need the money. But that's fine. Now let's keep going. Boys and girls, what we're going to do, we are going to get a balloon. I brought several balloons today. So if one pop, I have another one. We got a balloon, and we're going to do an experiment. A funnel, I put it inside here. And normally I'd have help from Marleny or Gavin or somebody, but it's because of COVID rules. We need to stay apart. It's very important for you guys to understand. You're 6 feet, 1 per feet. That's what the big man say is self. Okay, so we take some of this baking soda, and we put it in here, and we shake it up and make sure it goes down inside. I don't know if you remember this, Gavin. Have you ever done this at school? You think so? Okay, let's see. Let's see what the end result will be here. So we get it in, put the baking soda in the balloon, to the balloon. Okay? And what we do is we put in some more. just enough for the balloon to get a little fluffy. Just enough for the balloon to get fluffy. I'll put in just a little bit more. All right, and you help it to go in because sometimes it gets a little sticky. And now we have enough inside. Now that we have this baking soda in the balloon, we're taking it off the funnel, and we're using the funnel for a different purpose. Remember, put the baking soda in the balloon first. If not, when you pour the vinegar, it will stick all around and you will have problems. And then you take it and put it in here, and we get vinegar. Now, we're not going to tell you which brand of vinegar. There's so many vinegars out there. But we're going to use vinegar. And we take it and we pour it in here, boys and girls. And you put the vinegar inside just enough. Okay? And then, this is the part. Oh, let me put a little bit more. This is the part that I like. And then, remember, if you're going to try these things at home, make sure your mommy or your daddy is with you, okay? Don't do these things by yourself, okay? Because it's important you have an adult supervision all the time. Well, let's do this now. We're going to take the balloon and we put it over the mouth of the bottle of the Coca-Cola, of the plastic bottle. Now that we have it over, what we're going to do is we're going to lift it up and let's see what happens here. Look at that, look at that, look at that, look at that, look at that. Can you see that? You see what happens? It actually blows up the balloon, okay? And that's because gases are forming, and as the gases form, it rises up and it pushes the balloon up. And that's how we could get hot air balloons going up actually. I hope you enjoyed that experiment, all right? But now, boys and girls, listen, on Aussie Show, we normally try to make a balloon as well. So I'm going to try to make something. Let me see. And for this one, we are going to make a little dog. But this dog is not an ordinary dog, as you'll see in a few moments. It is not an ordinary dog. So here we go. This dog is it's a French poodle, but it's not an ordinary French poodle. Look at it. Now, boys and girls, when Ozzy was a little kid, he loved balloons and he blows all types. The one I gave him a little problem was this one. But I kept going and I tried and I never give up. I never give up. So you must never give up in anything you do in life. Don't ever give up. It's very, very important. All right? And now, let's see what we're going to do at this end. Oh. And if you look inside, you can see there's a little baby inside. Can you see that? It's a little baby inside. Can you see that, Marlene?
It's puppy.
Gavin?
Yeah.
It's a little baby poodle inside of the belly there. Can you see it? Uno can see it? Yes? But whenever the mama has the baby inside, the tail grows long. But let's fix the tail. What we have is this. With the baby inside. So I know some people like poodles. So Marlene, you can take this one, and you have the one that comes out you can give to Gavin.
Okay.
Yeah, whenever you're born, you can give it to Gavin. Okay. And so we have the poodle. And now, boys and girls, I'm going to do a magic for you. This magic has to do with fire. I don't want you to ever play with fires. Only professional people play with fires. Okay? And remember, on the Aussie Show, what we like to do, we show different experiments, and then we ask you to submit the experiment on a video at the email I gave you, the AussieShowBZ@gmail.com. You submit it to us, we air it, and you might even win a prize, okay? So, the Aussie Show is a very family-oriented show. Very, very family-oriented. It caters to kids and mommies and daddies and everybody else around. So just remember that. Now, let's get into the magic. This is a what? A what?
Candle.
It's a candle. And what color is the candle?
Red.
But it could be white, it could be green, it could be any color. I just so happened, I went to the store, I couldn't find the China. They shut the store. There's an ant crawling over me somewhere.
You're too sweet.
He's not afraid of COVID. So
You might ruin your makeup.
yeah. So I took the first candle that was there And now we're going to show you a magic trick. But to do this magic trick, I need to do this trick without my gloves. So I'm going to take it off. And I'm going to take the gloves and I'm going to put it in my pocket. And as I put this in my pocket, it keeps sticking on my hand. So here we go.
Okay.
Now that we have the gloves in my pocket, this is what we're going to do. Now, if you haven't been paying attention, this is the time. Because if you don't pay attention, you'll miss the entire magic. We're going to take this candle. Remember what I said earlier, boys and girls, don't ever play with fire. Only professional people like me play with fire, and your mommy and your daddy, sometimes they would light something, but they don't play with fire. Only professional people play with fire. So here we go. Don't ever play with it or you can get hurt. Oh, did you see that? It's a candle and it's lighted up. Now let's see if I can do a magic with this candle. Are you ready? Keep your eyes on this candle, boys and girls. Keep your eyes on the candle. Here we go. Ooh. Let's see what happens here. Let's see what happens here to this candle. And we do the candle like this. Remember, only professional people play with fire, okay? Don't you ever play with fire. If you ever play with fire, you can get hurt. So remember, don't ever play with fire. If you enjoy that, I want you to say, yeah! Touch your head, touch your nose, and make sure you blow out the candle. You know, I tried to blow it out with my nose, but it didn't work. And now, guess what, boys and girls? I also want to tell you, that whenever you look at the show, please tell your friends, all your friends, create a watch party. Give me as much likes as you want. It's very important. And I want to appeal. We're looking for a few good sponsors, all right? Or if you don't want to give us corporate sponsoring, send us a little $5, Wally, $10. That helps. All right? That's very important. If we don't have money, we can't move on to the show. But, of course, if you have something you want to give us, you know, like Gavin, I see Gavin come up here with some different quotes. And so if you'd like to donate one of those quotes, Gavin, we will raffle that stuff. All right? So that we can make some money and we can give it to a special dad for Father's Day, Gavin.
Yeah, I know,
yeah,
right?
You can think about that, right?
Great idea.
Yeah. Okay, I'm looking forward for it. Yeah. So anybody can give anything. Boys and girls, donate anything you have. If you have a lot of shoe and you got a nice one you want to give away, let me know. We'll work on it, all right? So with that, I want to say thank you very much for tuning in to us. And thank to Channel 5 and everybody else. Remember to look at the show. It's www.facebook.com/OZZYBZE and you will get tuned into the show. All right? And that's it for now. Remember, again, wear your mask. Don't give up. You need to stay in it, okay? Thank you.
Yay! All right, and there you have it. That was our version of the Aussie show. And clearly, why the kids enjoy it so much. It's so entertaining.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun here just watching. So we hope you guys enjoyed it too, who are watching at home.
All right. And now, kids don't get to move from the TV because it's time for a little lesson with Dr. Binox. And Dr. Binox has been taking us on a tour of the wonders of the universe. And now he's going to teach us about what are supernovas. That's coming up in Kids Time.
Yeah, it's super exciting.
Yeah.
So gather the kids around if they're not already there already. Get them to learn about this super interesting lesson. So here is Kids Times brought to you by our friends at JW Shopping Mart.